She called the cops and screamed, "Arrest him right now." The flashing lights filled my driveway, but I didn't move an inch. I was standing on my own porch, coffee still in my hand, wondering how far this woman would go this time. Karen, the so-called HOA president, was already waving her papers like they were the Constitution itself. She slapped a fake notice against my door and yelled, "You can't live here anymore. This property belongs to the association now." The officers glanced at her but didn't touch me. I looked them in the eye and said quietly, "This is my land. Deeds inside. She knows it." My voice was calm, but inside I could feel the anger boiling. Last week she had threatened to tow my truck. Yesterday, she told my daughter she couldn't play in her own yard. And now, she was standing here with men in uniforms who didn't look like any cops I'd ever seen. Something was off. Their badges looked cheap, their belts mismatched. One of them even had sneakers on. Karen barked at them, "Put him in cuffs. He's trespassing." Trespassing? On my own porch? I almost laughed, but I kept my face steady. I could see my neighbors peeking through their curtains, whispering, probably thinking I was about to be dragged away. But then, the door behind me opened. Heavy footsteps came down the hallway, and my son stepped out. Broad shoulders, steady eyes, quiet presence that changed the air instantly. Karen froze when she saw him. She didn't know, nobody knew, that my son had just returned from deployment. He stood beside me, arms crossed, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "These men aren't real cops." He stared at them like he had seen their kind before. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw Karen's confidence crack. "Ma'am," he said, leaning slightly toward her, "you've made a mistake opening this door today." Karen tried to laugh it off, but her voice wavered. "Oh, of course they're real officers. They're here because you broke HOA Code 47. She waved her fake paper again. But my son stepped closer and snatched it out of her hand before she could finish. He unfolded it slowly, scanned it, then held it up to the porch light. "This is a joke," he said flatly. "Wrong seal, wrong format, wrong everything. You printed this at home." His tone was calm, but every word carried weight, like a verdict. The two fake cops shifted nervously. One reached for his belt, but stopped when my son's eyes locked on him. That stare, cold, trained, unblinking, was the kind of look only someone who had spent nights in hostile territory could give. Karen, flustered, doubled down. "He's dangerous. I've seen him threaten neighbors. He has weapons in his house." She raised her voice so the watching neighbors could hear. "He's unstable. You need to arrest him now before he hurts someone." I clenched my jaw, but my son placed a hand on my shoulder, steady and reassuring. Then, with terrifying calm, he said, "Funny thing, lady. I spent the last 6 years leading Navy SEAL teams. You think I can't tell the difference between real officers and a couple of clowns in costume?" The crowd behind the curtains gasped. Karen's face drained of color. The two fake cops looked at each other, suddenly unsure if they should run or fight. The silence was thick, heavy, broken only when my son leaned in, lowering his voice so only Karen could hear. "You picked the wrong house." And for the first time that night, Karen took a step back. Karen's heels scraped against the driveway as she backed away. But her pride wouldn't let her surrender. "You don't scare me," she spat, though her voice cracked. "The HOA has power. I'll have your house condemned, I'll—" "Enough," my son cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. He held the fake paper high so everyone watching could see. "This is fraud. You tried to trick real law enforcement and half the neighborhood with a fake order. That's a felony." Karen's eyes darted toward the men in knockoff uniforms. They were sweating now, their act crumbling. One muttered under his breath, "She said this would be easy." "Quiet." Karen snapped at them. But it was too late, neighbors had slipped out of their homes, drawn by the shouting. Phones were raised, cameras rolling. The glow of recording screens lit up the street like fireflies. I spoke up for the first time, my voice carrying across the crowd. You came onto my land. You tried to scare me off it. You tried to shame me in front of my family. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But you forgot one thing. This land is mine. And I don't scare easy. The fake cops shifted again, clearly itching to leave, but my son wasn't done. He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen. And within seconds a voice came through loud and clear. County Sheriff's Department, what's your emergency? The color drained from Karen's face. She stammered, wait, you're really calling them? My son smirked, his eyes locked on hers. Oh, I'm not just calling. They're already on their way. And right then, sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder every second. Red and blue lights flooded the street, washing over the houses and turning the quiet neighborhood into a stage. Real patrol cars pulled up, tires crunching against the pavement. Far heavier and sharper than the cheap SUV Karen's officers had rolled in with. The crowd of neighbors moved closer, whispering. Some even clapping softly as if justice itself was pulling into the driveway. Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide whether to scream or beg. The two fake cops instantly lost their act, one shoved his badge into his pocket. The other tried to slip toward the curb. But my son stepped forward, blocking their path with nothing more than his presence. Stay right there, he ordered, calm but commanding. They obeyed like rookies caught in a lie. The real sheriff climbed out of his cruiser, tall, broad, and stone-faced. His flashlight beam swept across the fake officers, then landed on Karen. What's going on here? He asked, voice deep and authoritative. Karen pounced on the moment, desperate to regain control. Officer, thank God you're here. Arrest him. She pointed at me like a villain in a bad play. He's dangerous. He's trespassing on HOA property. The sheriff didn't move. He just raised an eyebrow. Trespassing. On his own porch. His gaze shifted to me, then to my son, who gave a slight nod. I've got everything recorded, my son said, holding up his phone. Fake eviction notices, impersonation of officers. Harassment on private property. He turned the screen so the sheriff could see. She brought them here. Told them to take him away. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He turned slowly toward Karen. Ma'am. Do you understand the crimes you've just committed? Karen's bravado cracked like thin glass. And no, they told me this was legal, I was just. Turn around, the sheriff cut her off. The click of handcuffs echoed across the street. The neighbors gasped, some even cheered. Karen's shrill voice filled the night, you can't do this to me. I run this neighborhood. But nobody was listening anymore. The sheriff's deputies quickly moved in, separating the two fake cops from Karen. Their fake badges and mismatched gear were laid out on the hood of a cruiser for everyone to see. The truth was undeniable now. They weren't officers, they were just hired muscle, caught red-handed. Karen's voice grew thinner as her power slipped away. You don't understand, I was protecting the community. I was just protecting no one, the sheriff interrupted firmly. You trespassed, harassed, and endangered this family. He gestured toward me and my son. And you'll answer for it in court. As Karen was led away in handcuffs. The neighbors who had once whispered in fear now stood openly in the street. Some shook their heads, others muttered. About time. One man clapped slowly. And soon more followed until the sound of applause filled the night. I looked at my son, pride swelling in my chest. He stood tall, calm, like he had on the battlefield. Only now he was defending his own home. Karen screamed over the cuffs, her voice breaking. This isn't over. I'll be back. But her words were drowned out by the slam of the cruiser door shutting behind her. The sheriff turned back to me. You handled this better than most would have. I gave a small nod. I didn't fight for this country just to be told I can't sit on my own porch. My son added quietly, freedom doesn't need permission. The crowd fell silent at his words. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak before now looked at us differently, not as victims, but as people who stood their ground. As the patrol cars pulled away, taking Karen and her hired pretenders with them, the street slowly emptied. I sat back down on my porch, the night calm once again. My son stayed beside me, arms crossed, eyes still sharp. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. Not just because Karen was gone, but because everyone now knew the truth. This was our land. Our home. And nobody, not even a fake HOA with fake cops, was going to take that away.